The theme today is Celebrate Me Home, and I think that song had a good question for all of us. What does home mean to you? I know there's a longing in all of us to be at home, family, friends, whatever that means to you. When I get a vision of home, actually I get two visions. One of my material structure, which I love being home. Maybe not quite as much as we've been home. But I love being home because it's got everything I love at home. My husband, my dog, my cat, my fish, my plants, my birds, my family comes. I don't have birds, but I see birds. But I love being home. I love the feeling of home. But I also get the vision of that place within. The song was talking about the Christmas, that place within us that we know is our eternal home. I know there's been a lot of longing for spirituality at this time with the pandemic and the struggling and the loss and the uncertainty. I feel it's a collective yearning that we feel to find out, wow, there's something more. There's got to be something more than this. And people are looking for that spiritual awakening to feel, oh, it's going to be okay. We know in this physical existence, like the material structure, change is the only inevitable. I mean, there is a process, an evolutionary process of growing and decaying and dying and being born. And not just physically, but this is in our emotional, our mental, our spiritual state. There's a process that we go through, an evolutionary process, and it reminds us of this journey of going home, of finding home. You know, we all have a different experience of what it is. You know, Joseph Campbell, beautiful 20th century, he was a professor, but he studied comparative mythology and comparative religion, and he really studied the human experience. And he talked about the hero's journey, which is the journey we're all on, a journey. Well, first of all, I'll tell you, he said that the purpose of the journey of this human experience, purpose, is compassion. And I believe that. If we know the compassionate nature of Spirit, of God, of love, then we see that this journey is awakening to that place, that peace, that understanding. That's the journey. That's the purpose of our journey. But the goal of the journey is self-discovery, that we find out who we are, where we come from, that we remember. You know, if we're on this journey of this remembrance, we find that, well, let me just back step a minute. Many people think that, oh, when I become spiritual, I can avoid all the pain and discomfort in the world because I can just rise above it, right? Wrong. That's not what it is. Spirituality is when we get to that place of self-discovery, when we can know, we can hold the both and, the pain and the sorrow, the love and the anger. We can hold it all in us and still be connected to Spirit, that we can hold it all to see that bigger picture because we've tapped that place within. And that's why in this journey of self-discovery, we can't have compassion, real compassion, unless we've suffered and we understand what it's like. And we can't really self-discover ourselves until we've lost ourselves, and until we really don't remember who we are, until we feel like we don't fit, we don't belong, what's going on. Then we can go on this journey of self-discovery. Well, Ernest Holmes says one of the greatest spiritual lessons in the history of religious education is the parable of the Prodigal Son. And that's probably Jesus' most well-known parable. Now, what I love about parables is they're simple stories that are told that will meet you where you are. There's so many layers to the parables Jesus told that wherever you are in your life, you could find a new meaning or a deeper meaning or a greater understanding. So in the prodigal of the parable son, there's the lesson, the great lesson, that Spirit, God, love never leaves us. Never. We can go off to far countries, have riotous living, be crazy, do whatever we do, make mistakes, sins, whatever we call them, missing the mark. We can do all that, but still, there's a place and something within us that's calling us home. And that's what the prodigal son did. And the messages in the story, first of all, it's a story of a father. We will call it Father, Mother, God. There's a story of a father that has two sons. And the two sons represent self-choice. That you and I, gosh, we can choose. Any moment we can choose. I mean, we have feelings in us. And, why don't we feel at home all the time? When we're really attached to our feelings, well, our feelings are based on our thoughts, our beliefs. They're based on the biochemical goings on in our bodies. There's so much. Feelings come and go. I mean, they change all the time, but if we live by our feelings constantly, we're never going to really feel at home. But we need to get to that place where we can have feelings, human feelings, but we can also have that feeling of being connected to spirit at all times. Well, the younger son, he didn't have that. He didn't feel connected. And he went up to his father, but he went up to his father and he said, Dad, I want my inheritance, my portion of it right now, because I have things to do. Well, this father, which isn't like most of us, said, well, okay, I'll give you your portion of your large inheritance right now. Didn't ask him what he was going to do with it, if he was going to go anywhere, just said, sure, yes, because we know that God only says yes to what we put out there. So here the son gets this inheritance, and he takes it and he turns his back on the father. He wants to get as far away as possible. And he goes off and he starts spending this money in riotous living. Well, symbolically and metaphorically, what the far country means, where he went, the far country, means our conscious separation from God. When we decide, hey, I can do this on my own, which he said. He wanted to get far away from his father. He wanted to do this on his own. And so that far country took him further away. His eyes weren't looking at the bigger picture. His ears were clogged up. His senses were numbed. His consciousness was numbed. And he spent all his money, all his inheritance in riotous living. And he ended up going out in the fields to feed the pigs. Lost all his social stature. Well, that's the time that we can realize I am lost. I have lost my connection to anything that I understand, that there's any hope. And he had to come to himself, and he thought, I remember. It was the great awakening that he remembered. He may have left, but his father's house was still there. And he could return to the father's house, but he knew he couldn't return as the same person. He couldn't have that bloated ego and that sense of getting away. He had to come back humbled. He had to come back. He knew he had to be in service, that he had to serve his father and help out and be part of this cycle of life in order for him to come back. Well, what the story tells us is no matter how naughty we've been, or how often we've done things that weren't right on track with what we knew what was good and right and true, at any time we can make that turn as a changed person, as somebody who understands, I better make some changes in myself. I remember, and I don't remember the exact words of it, but I love T.S. Eliot, and he said, after all my exploration, I arrived at the same place I started, and I saw it for the very first time. And that's our journey, this hero's journey, this journey of awakening, when we realize there's something more. There is something more going on than I understand. And the father's house that the son was returning to didn't change. It was still prosperous and abundant and loving and joyful. And he had to turn around. And when that young son turned around and went back to the father's house, the father knew and met him with open arms. He said, there you are, let us rejoice. He didn't say, where have you been? What did you do with the money? Where's all this? You know that parent thing we do. He didn't do any of that. He just said, let us rejoice. And he gave him the best robe and the best ring and the best shoes. And he said, let's rejoice, have a feast I am so glad you're here. And that's for all of us to remember when we feel lost, when we feel in want, when we're searching for things. And that's what the young son was doing. He was trying to fill this feeling of being lost and misplaced with all these external things, you know. It's not wrong to want a better house or better things, because we're on that journey, you know. We're here to grow and expand, and we can want things, and that's good. But it's when we aren't happy where we are, and that's just what you were saying, Madeline, in the reading. If you're not happy where you are, you're never going to get fed by what you get. And so the young son went back with a new understanding, a new humility, and he went back to his father, and his father welcomed him. The same with us. We have that ability at any moment to listen to that. We can call it the divine urge, the divine spark, our intuition, our still small voice within, whatever we call it, because it will always tell us this is the path and this is the way to go. But it's quiet, and it will tell us. Now, Ernest Holmes said, if you're going to get back to the Father's house, he said, you've got to leave the pig pen. You can't stay in the pig pen and expect to get back to the allness and wonder of God. So that's one choice. The son that decided to go far and spend all his money and do all this craziness, but he came home. So we probably think, well, the older son, he stayed home, and man, he worked on his father's land, and he was there, and he did all that was good and right and true. Well, not quite. When his brother came home, he heard all this happiness and merriment and all this joy, and he couldn't understand what it was, and he asked one of the servants, well, what's going on? And the servant said, oh, your brother's home, and we're throwing him a big banquet and a feast. And the older brother said, what? I've done all the work. Where's he been? We can't give him a party, and he chose not to go to the feast. However, when he told his father his upset, I've been here, Dad. I've been the one working this land. I deserve all of this. And the father once again said, you've always been with me. Always. Everything I have is yours. God's Spirit never, ever, universal intelligence, never responds in anger, condemnation, judgment. There's always a love. So if you wonder when you're listening to that voice within, if you're wondering, well, is this my voice or is this the voice of Spirit? Spirit speaks in love and kindness and quietly. And if that's the voice you hear, goodness, then you know you're listening to the right voice. So I think the story, importantly, it's always this self-choice we have, and the faraway country is a place where we all go when we choose to separate from thoughts of goodness. And there's also a reciprocal action always in this universe. That's one of the laws of the universe, that when we reach out, when we give, we receive. We talk about that all the time. There's this reciprocal action. And Spirit was always there waiting. The house is always there. Nothing happens. We reside in Spirit. We live there. But we can turn our back. The door is always open. It's always open, but we can not step in. We can make the choice not to be involved. It's up to us what we do with the gifts we've been given. So when the song was being sung, Where is Christmas? I mean, it's something we feel. It's so dang different this year. And it's not the way we really want it, and we can't have the feeling, even though the holidays are, up and down, a lot of emotions anyway, we have to find it more than ever within. And that's why I mentioned in the beginning of the service, I see people kinder and caring and thoughtful, because we're realizing that that's really why we're here. The true gift of the season is about the giving that we get to do in our kindness and our love and our caring for one another and for ourselves. We get to give that. We get to be that. So I think, for me, my wish this year was that we all make a decision, even in the toughest times, because if you can think of the prodigal son was feeding the pigs when he had his awakening, this would be a pretty good time for us to wake up to something more. A pretty darn good time that we could say, hey, there's something more. What can I do to make somebody else's life better, to make my life better? Because there's a lot that we haven't thought of before. In the Bible, it says, God said, I give you life and I give you death. I give you blessings, I give you curses. Choose life. Choose life so you can live fully. Ask yourself, am I choosing life today, or am I choosing to be in the mire, in the pig pen, in the negativity, in the problems? We get to choose. Use this as the story as just an example of all the things we can do to set ourselves right, to be in alignment with what is good and right and true. This is the time, and it's here for us in this moment. It's here. You know, this isn't something just Jesus talked about. All of the mystics talk about the first and foremost thing to get us on the right track of living, where we can find that peace even amidst the pain and the sorrow and the problems and the fear and the uncertainty. This is from a 13th century German mystic, Mechthild of Magdeburg. And she said, the day of my spiritual awakening was the day I saw and I knew all things in God, and God in all things, the oneness understanding. She said that was her day she woke up. No longer separated. That's the wholeness I'm talking about. And a century later, in a different country, this is Julian of Norwich, a 14th century English mystic, said, we are in God, and God, whom we do not see, is in us. And that's the language of the mystics, that understanding that it's all part of one. And it's all this journey of evolution and awakening and remembering who we are. So I'm just going to ask you in this moment, let's just close this part today with a prayer of understanding, of peace, of centering into that oneness. We may find home anytime we desire as we settle in, close our eyes, quiet our minds, just let whatever's on our mind melt away. Keep it going until it's melted and your mind is still. And feel that divine urge, that spark of life in your heart, at the center of your being, that's pulling you to a greater understanding of our relationship with God, with love, with peace, with understanding. That understanding that can see all the chaos and confusion in the world around us, all the ups and downs and goods and bads, and still know what really matters. It is this voice, this guidance, that will take us home to that place of oneness that our mystics speak of, the place that beyond right doing and wrongdoing, the field that Rumi speaks of. So just in this moment, in your heart and mind, just say, I am one with God. All that God is, I am. I own my inheritance now of peace and love and goodness and joy and creativity and prosperity. I own it. I am it. I share it. Because I know that God is good and so am I. And as you know that in the depth of your being, I just invite you to join me. Join me in this holiday season and beyond to carry home, to consciously carry home, which is our oneness of God with us wherever we go. Just feel that. Just know it. Make that commitment. Put your hook into that greater energy, that power greater than we are, and just let it flow through you. And let us celebrate. So take a nice deep breath, filling yourself as deep as you can in Mass, and breathe in the aliveness that we are. And let that Spirit, which is God and love and goodness, ring in our hearts and minds and be the truth we live during this holiday season. I bless all of you as we celebrate this time together. And we remember we are on this journey together. We're on it together. And it is the love in our hearts that keeps that energy and that goodness flowing. We have a lot to celebrate. I celebrate you as I know you do, me and our community together. We are blessed. And so it is. God bless you all.